Не было же такой атаки. Никогда не было такой атаки на человеческое сознание. Никогда. Тысячелетиями человек существовал, да, и как-то, в общем, воспитывался, да. И вдруг в 50 лет все это подвергается атаке, переосмысливанию, да, и возникновению совершенно другого способа духовного существования.
Протяженность – это наша иллюзия. Пространство – наша иллюзия, время – наша иллюзия. И путь – тоже наша иллюзия.
Our own interest depend on other. Our own future depend on present because of law of causality.
Our condition, human condition, everything is very much limited, going after mind. So then we have so many problems. All problems arise with our limitations.
Ты к какому-то моменту приходишь к точке, когда ты уже не можешь потратить, как бы ты ни изощрялся и не старался, то, что у тебя есть. А если ты еще пытаешься делать это осмысленно, заниматься осмысленной деятельностью, да, ты выясняешь, что, ой, мамочки мои, может, зря я ввязался-то в такие игры, да, ценности-то присваивать никому не принадлежащие во всей этой вселенной.
Who are we? Well, we are material objects. We are highly developed animals. We are, thinking machines and so on. But we're also an infinite field of consciousness that has no boundaries.
How did we manage to end up here? And what are we doing here? And what is our relationship to the higher source? And what is our place? What is our function here with all of this? You know, how do we fit in? And how do we stay connected with spirits?
What I'm doing outside should also help me in my inner work. For example, if I listen to music or if I listen to dance, every time I do that, it strengthens my own inner psyche also.
Откуда я знаю этот опыт? Я никогда не был стрелой монгольского воина, я никогда не был лошадью рыцаря священного Грааля, я никогда не был распят на кресте, я не сгорал, я не тонул, меня не вкручивал в землю танк фашистский, да? Откуда я знаю этот опыт?
Sometimes there's no particular reason that you can even point out. It just so happens, and you feel united with all, and time stands still, and you are really in the present moment. Reality touches you fully. It looks at you. It takes hold of you. It being the universe.
The importance of the brain is very clear. This is where spiritual traditions fall short because they sort of undermine the brain. But, it's not easy to think of disembodied consciousness because we never have, and we cannot have, obviously, any evidence ever of disembodied consciousness. So it's a very intricate play between matter and consciousness.
Suppose you're really concerned with deep existential questions. Does life have any meaning? Is there a good way to live, or doesn't it make any difference one way or the other? Because, the dominant official philosophy of materialism doesn't give you any purpose in life.
Well, I think that visionary art is any artwork that comes from the realm of the imagination, the realm of visions. All of the different sacred art traditions begin in the visionary domain.
If we are not satisfied, we will see our life always through these eyes, through this perspective, that we are not satisfied, that we don't like our life, or just at a certain moment we perceive life as a problem. We can try to understand enlightenment or just our own condition as the effort or the wish to be, for example, happy and having a pleasant life.
I not come here just physical and the brain, eat, drink, drunk, sex, and die. I have another thing inside me that I need to take care.
When we're looking at indigenous people who are still connected to nature, they are amazed at what we don't notice, what we're unaware of, how we treat dreams as if they're not part of your living experience, how we treat even sleep as if you're not conscious, as if the brain somehow is in some other room doing something else. All of this is nonsense.
The Aboriginal Australians who said the earth is dreaming. And if they had known more about the skies, they would have said the sky is dreaming. The Aboriginal people of the Andes spoke about Pachamama, which means Mother Earth or Mother Universe. There is some intelligence in the background, some sort of intelligence which is there to guide us and move us.
Some called it God, others called it consciousness, some called it Christ, some called it Tao, but people called it different things, but they were all pointing to some force in the universe which was responsible ultimately for everything.
Almost anybody, and most people in fact, have had at least a glimmer of this ultimate unity consciousness. Whether they're listening to music, or watching a sunset, or making love, or just walking in nature. And all of a sudden, pow, their separate self is gone, and they are everything. This is their self, and they're like, I knew this, this is home, this is it, this is myself, my God. And so that's, extraordinary. And then the experience tends to fade a little bit, yeah. And so then they're like, how did I do that?
Мне кажется, у меня есть какие-то базовые понятия, да, которые в человеке, в человечестве должны были бы развиваться. Такие, как совесть, например. Или такие, как степень лжи. Мне кажется, что вообще человек возник только тогда, когда у него появилось чувство совести и чувство прекрасного.
The inner demons are the demons that arise from within our own minds, without any particular influence from the outside, such as if you have depression that isn't caused by something that happened from the outside, but just arises in the mind, and you can be in the most amazing, beautiful place and you still have this demon of depression because it's an inner demon.
Мы являемся наследниками каких-то смесей разного рода духовных и квазидуховных традиций, там, религиозных, конфессиональных, народных укладов, там, я не знаю, шаманистских, я не знаю, личностно-шизофренических разных, там, я не знаю.
When I was a child, I had spiritual experiences anyway, in nature, in everyday life. Just feeling connected in a much larger way than just as an individual. Feeling connected with nature, with the ocean, with the horse. I would ride the horse swimming in the ocean. That was a very unitive experience for me.
I don't understand life, but I love it. And I like to go with it. My rational mind cannot follow exactly every time. And being a physicist, I love to follow things exactly. But some things are non-local and are outside of the ability to comprehend mechanistically.
And the heart, you have love, joy, happy, appreciation, gratefulness. The negative one, you hatred, impatience, hastiness, cruelty. So they are negative, positive. So we want to grow the positive and balancing the negative. We don't want to kill them. We don't want to kill the negative.
Есть потребность в правде, есть потребность в чистоте, есть потребность в справедливости. И человек, современный человек, по крайней мере в нашем государстве, он ищет справедливость, он ищет место, где он может быть откровенным хотя бы с самим собой.
Вот он я, здесь реальный. Вы пялите сейчас в экран вашего компьютера, а вы там есть? Hey. А можете мне доказать это? Вот и получается, что вас нет, а я есть.
So if you just think, well, I'm a Russian or Ukrainian or who has had a particular background, and you just see yourself as the victim of a personal and cultural life experience, will never experience the glory of this cosmocentric perspective. But when you see that your personal life circumstances, your cultural life circumstances are a very small part of a much, much bigger picture, you begin to see and feel beyond the relative nature of your personal and cultural background and karmas, and you begin to awaken to a truly cosmocentric self-orientation and life orientation.
The three major value systems fighting in the culture wars in the West in general. One is the traditional religious fundamentalist value system. The next is the modern, rational, scientific value system. And then the next is the postmodern, multicultural value system.
А потом она накопилась с веками, вот эта вот системная ошибочка, значит, и никому в голову не приходит, что, собственно говоря, грех – это не грех, а просто неосознанность.
We are limiting this or that, myself, then others, then our group, and the other, for example. Everything is limited that way.
Compassionate attitude is actually the best way to achieve individual happiness.
В христианстве и в буддизме есть вот идея серединного пути, когда мы ценим многообразие и уважаем различия.
In general, you choose one perspective and you apply it to all, you always create problem. So in this case, Buddha didn't explain any specific perspective.
In my opinion, there's a lot of beautiful spiritual experiences that we have every day, but most people don't even recognize them. Then they're not aware of them because their minds are too busy.
You see, you were looking for roots of your emotional and psychosomatic problems, but ultimately the healing happens by discovering that you are not whole, that you're sort of identifying just with a fragment of yourself.
Это время, когда все слова уже сказаны, все образы уже сыграны, все персонажи, все категории, все сценарии основаны на категориях противопоставления добра и зла, все, они исчерпаны. С их помощью уже ничего невозможно сказать. Никакие картины ты уже не нарисуешь, это время цитат. И даже то, что это время цитат, это тоже цитата.
Вдруг я осознал, что эти состояния мы имели. Все высокие состояния в детстве, во время болезни, какие-то проблески их. И это не что-то чуждое нам, до чего нужно добрести где-то там вовне.
And so I felt this sort of like memory of something that I knew before, but I had forgotten. And so I asked my teacher if I could learn it, and he said yes.
I entered another reality, much to my surprise. With
really, really important information. Anthropologists had assumed that this was just superstition or nonsense, but I realized that when I described my experiences to the Indians, they already knew all my experiences ahead of time because the same thing had happened to them.
For a long time in my life, I was much more comfortable being in meditation or being in some situation where I could be in those places. That was much easier for me than living my everyday life.
There was literally one moment, one evening, as I was walking across my living room floor, when I suddenly realized that at the heart of the great religions, hidden behind the conventional institutions and rituals and dogmas, was a reservoir of psychological and spiritual practices for cultivating the same insights and understandings that the great religious founders and saints and sages had discovered. So it was totally life-altering discovery.
To actually have a spiritual experience, which usually means going into some altered state of consciousness where you perceive yourself in the world in a very different way, that can totally turn a person around. The most dramatic example of that is near-death experiences. People who have near-death experiences, the first thing that happens is that most of them will say, I don't believe that we survived death. They say, I know we survived death. I was dead and I was still there, and now I'm back to tell you about it. That changes your whole perspective on life when you know death isn't the end.
I say, oh no, that can't be real. That's just me. I'm the problem. I'm the bad one. Why am I having these thoughts? Why am I having these dreams and memories? I must just be making it up. And that's a very difficult road for many people.
Every life has suffering in it. We all have the experience of separation, the experience of loss, the experience of struggle. Every life has suffering in it. But we also have a lot of unnecessary suffering that we create for ourselves. And that's the part that I think can be changed.
Like all spiritual journeys, they are very mysterious, huh? And we take steps towards our spiritual teachers without actually realizing that we are doing so.
The Native American Indians, they actually recognize that state of grace. When a person is being born or when a person is dying, the whole village wants to be a part of it. People almost line up because they feel that if you're in the presence of this incredible event, spirit jumps into some of us, you know. If you're lucky, that energy that is released in that moment of birthing into another dimension at death, that spirit comes into us and it stays with us, and it's an incredible state of grace and beauty.
Очень важная, основная идея христианства и православия, да, в том, что это идея богочеловечности. То есть Бог выразился в человеке. То есть, глядя в глаза другого человека, я могу досмотреться до Бога. Глядя в глаза инакого, я призван увидеть там божественное. Вот это известная притча Христа, что болен был и посетили меня. В тюрьме был, и вы туда пришли ко мне. Голоден был, вы накормили меня.
I think the tremendous problem that the source of the great religions are transpersonal experiences, are visionary experiences of the founders, of the prophets, of the early disciples, and so on. But then when the religions become organized, then very frequently the original spiritual source, the message is lost. And you can have a religion that has absolutely no spirituality in it. On the other hand, you can be very spiritual without being associated with any specific religion.
Православный, значит, правильно славящий Бога. Бог, безусловно, заслуживает того, чтобы его славить. Вот я этим и занимаюсь. Индуисты тоже считают, что они правильно славят Бога. Кто на земле сказал бы, я неправильно славлю Бога? Наверное, каждый считает, что он прав.
Every tradition is like a stream that comes out from a spring, from the original spring, and then it flows down, and as it flows down, it takes on sand from here and earth from here and little pieces of wood and leaves and mud. And so in order to find the pure teaching, you always have to go back to the origins.
Человека создал Бог. Бог – любовь. Милые, родные, вы созданы любовью божественной. Милые, родные, любимые, сладенькие.
I think that now we need to cover the whole earth with a lattice, with a net of spiritual communities. Not like the old days, one major light, the Holy Roman Empire, or Christianity, or Buddhism, or Islam, coming from one source. I think now what has happened is in this democratic age, it needs to be more widely spread.
All of psychology eventually must touch all of these various states of consciousness. Why? Because we're people. And we have also normal states, so-called normal states of consciousness. Hello, how are you? To the most extreme, altered, comatose state, near-death experience.
We also have fundamentally different dimensions that we can be aware of and that we can grow and develop. And these are traditionally known as things like the good, the true, and the beautiful. I, we, and it, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, art, morals, science. But these are all important dimensions of the manifest world. We can also, in each of these areas, grow up from archaic to magic to mythic to rational to pluralistic to integral perspectives.
As Buddhism comes to the West, it is crossing not only from one culture to another, but from one era to another, from an agrarian era in which it was born to a postmodern world. Yeah. And so it's really important that the concepts of wisdom of, for example, Buddhism, be translated into postmodern language, concepts, ideas. Otherwise, they just don't make sense.
The most important thing is, how do we integrate those experiences of awakening into our ordinary life?
Looking at the reflection of the spirit, but not the spirit itself. And when I turned around and I realized that meditation was the only way forward, it was the only way to a path where where I could confront my own true reality.
Through the voice, we unveil, we reveal, we express that tension.
Правильная музыка такая, в которой накоплен определенный опыт, она может человека оторвать от его болезней, от его мыслей каких-то. Она может унести его туда, где этого нет ничего. У грузин существует так называемая песня ранения. То есть это когда раненый воин лежит, и вокруг него собираются мужчины кругом и поют некую специальную песню вот этим грузинским многоголосием. И в этот момент из человека пули вынимают, и он не чувствует.
It's one of my deepest states of meditation. When I start painting, it takes me just a little moment where I'm still in my mind maybe, but after maybe a few minutes, hopefully, or maybe after, half an hour, all of a sudden there's a change and I enter a different reality. It's almost like I'm pushing through a veil and I'm in this other reality where what I do is not even an act of me anymore. I feel like what happens on the canvas is something that is coming through me.
I think that art has had a special connection with the creative source. This universe is a creation. We are all expressions of this creative source. So you could say that God, if you use those kinds of words, is an artist.
I'm very simple, I don't have the great spiritual experiences that I can put in words where I can say this chakra opened and then this lightning went off or whatever, I'm just more down to earth somehow, and my nourishment comes from that joy that I feel when we sing together, when we play together.
The official philosophy of the modern West is scientific materialism. That's still ultimately what the vast majority of leaders take to be real. And so that's been a real problem.
The impact of materialism on the increase of suffering of the world cannot be ignored. The greatest opium. This is a more severe opium, more severe drug than anything we have ever encountered, the human consciousness has encountered. This addiction to materialism is probably the biggest drug addiction that we have to overcome.
War, poverty, injustice, climate change. Because each of those comes from the notion that I am separate from you.
If only we could be more awake to recognize that every aspect of reality is sacred, but we don't see it.
Мы все поломались, мы все потерялись, мы находимся в этом упоении англосаксонской парадигмы, безумными заимствованиями плохо понятых слов, потерей вообще осознания механизмов, разрушения способов смыслообразования, которые присущи только нам.
Present stage of scientific development, there are certainly some limited things we could find about someone who claimed they were enlightened. So, for example, if someone said, I'm enlightened, I have no attachments or aversions or something like that, you then measured their physiological responses and showed them some erotic or threatening stimuli, and they were showing all sorts of big reactions, then their claim that they're totally unattached or something like that, you'd begin to wonder.
At that time, when I was doing this psychotherapy and engaged in meditation, there were very few people doing those, and I was desperately looking for some way of making sense of both of these practices and of the contemplative traditions and of my own experiences.
Now, what is the idea? The idea is that you surrender to the Guru and will get to enlightenment. Enlightened consciousness where everything is one, everything is the same, the characteristic of the quantum self, in other words. The danger is that people who have not experienced ego, how can they surrender the ego? Like you're not wealthy, how can you surrender wealth? For a poor person who has just a few rupees, what is he surrendering? But he will be more attached to that few rupees than a rich person will be attached to their dollars or their rubles, right?
Для себя строишь какую-то систему, но и она совершенно неправильная. Ну, как я не знаю, допустим, вот есть там грибы, они там в лесу там растут. Но кто-то сказал, что есть какие-то пенициллиновые грибы, они растут в пробирке, и все. И вот человек идет на завод пробирок и начинает искать там грибы, потому что там вроде пробирки и какие-то грибы должны быть. Вот. Но никаких съедобных грибов он не обнаруживает. Обнаруживает сплошные пробирки, их очень много. Он знает все их виды, там колбы, такие пробирки, сякие пробирки, только грибов нет.
Как наш брат из Китая сказал, Лао Цзи сказал, что не знающий говорит, а знающий молчит. Вот этот самый опыт молчания, опыт исихи или созерцания, он является ключевым, но, к сожалению, забытым в современном православии в достаточной мере. Мы читаем древние потеряки, различные отечники, что ученик приходил к старцу, и он просто жил рядом. И старец почти не комментировал. Только в какой-то момент он мог сказать 2-3 слова. Но из вот этой сонастроенности, открытости в любви, из совместной жизни, эта вибрация, знание этого безграничного пространства и присутствия, она передавалась.
People have moments of enlightenment, and we are exploring into something. But we have to be careful, I think, saying, this one's enlightened. I've met a number of gurus. The disciples said they're enlightened, but their behavior didn't look very enlightened to me. I mean, I don't want to name any names, but I think we have to be careful with this kind of ultimate naming. We're all in process.
I mean, the mystical message is you are divine. You can discover your own divinity, and you can discover the divine nature of the world. Now, if they tell you you're a miserable sinner, that the last place where you would look for the divine is inside.
В киноиндустрии, в компьютерных играх, в этих всех информационных источниках, которые протекают сквозь человека, новое поколение, оно уже не может себя осознавать иначе, как многоликого персонажа. Человек должен, наконец, осознать себя, что он театр, что нет какого-то его одного, которого он придерживается, и во всех ситуациях он будет блюсти вот эти ценности.
Это дело целой жизни, это дело духовной практики. Это показать первому встречному нельзя, потому что эта истина не нужна первому встречному.
And let me give you an example, which is a peculiar one, which is psychotherapy. And I'm talking about any of 100 schools, has one thing in common, which is the client arrives, opens the door, walks in the room, and shuts the door. The therapist has no idea of the reality that the client is actually in, and is limited to the story that's told.
Many spiritual systems say, if you look within, you will find God. God, you are God. God is within you. But people who have been traumatized or abused or hurt in some way look inside, and what they find is a barrier between them and who they really are.
Можно очень глубоко погружаться там, в какие-то социокультурные аспекты, там еще что-то там, искать, где та самая правда, которую все хотят услышать, какой-то там, находить какие-то глубинные моменты, какой-то там, я не знаю, социокультурную мораль, там еще что-то. И вот это все выковыривать крупицами и показывать, но это никого не заинтересует, потому что самое красивое, и самое любопытное, и самое интересное, и самое все и доступное, оно находится наверху.
Process mind is the intelligence behind your dreams, but it's also the intelligence behind all your spontaneous movements when you're very relaxed. It's the intelligence behind making you catch certain things, catch your attention or flirt with your attention. Oh, it's an intelligence. You need to be relaxed to pick it up. That's the basis of the process mind. And perhaps the strongest experiences, you can do it in meditation, opening your mind and relaxing, but movement and letting yourself move being the dance of the ancient one, letting the universe move you, get you in best touch with what Jung would have called today the unconscious, I think. It's really the universe. It's a force field that we experience.
When we are succeed to be in its real nature, this is in Doctrine teaching is considered then that is a realization or that is illumination. We can call different way. Why? Because in our real nature we say also we have infinite potentiality.
И вот мы сейчас живем в уникальное время, которое даст понять, что произошло с человеческой душой.
Do you have an experience of universal love or luminosity descending and pouring over you, or you expanding and being one with everything? You know it. You are one with that. You know it. That's a state. And so humanity was aware of those, like I say, going at least back 50,000 years, back to the early shamans, and the state experiences that they had as they explored it.
Вот я устроен как ребенок. Я с тех пор не вырастал. А если вырастал, то я уже забыл. То, чему меня научили, от этого избавился. То, что истина должна быть очень просто. То, что я знаю, что Бог есть. Я знаю, что я Его люблю больше всего, что может быть на земле, потому что Он причина земли. И причина меня тоже. А чем занимаются православные, индуисты, буддисты и все остальные, я знаю по книгам. Насколько я понимаю, тем же. Но вникать в суть их расприй я никак не могу, потому что они оперируют терминами, которых я не знаю. И суть их я не понимаю.
Spiritual seekers may have an experience of wholeness. The normal structure of myself as separate crashes. And you look around and your experience is that this is all one thing. This is all part of an unbroken wholeness. There is no sexual experience, there is no emotional experience, there's no love experience, there's no experience better than that. The experience of unity, of oneness, of total connection with what is.
Суть-то состоит в любом случае в том, чтобы поменять представление о мире. Потому что тот бардак, который я получил в наследство от любезного, разлюбезного человеческого, в его, особенно в русскоязычной части, ну просто не налазит ни на какую голову, ни на какие уши.
The monks have dedicated their whole life to the experience. With other people, it is more a side issue. They go for a certain time, they do this practice or so. But the monks have the great luxury of having nothing else to do, except if you travel around and give lectures and write books. But basically in the monastery, you have nothing else to do but to be in the present moment, do simple things. We have a farm and we have sheep and we have a garden and we chant, and so the whole day we study. The whole day is just dedicated to doing whatever you do in this very quiet rhythm. And that is a great blessing.
I read some of the poetry of mystics of different cultures, and they talk very passionately, almost sexually, about this yearning for God, this hunger for connection with the divine, thirst inside of us. And for many reasons, some people are drawn away from the thirst for the true spirit into the tempting world around us, where external things are going to make you happy. You know, if you have the right computer or the right car or you have the right relationship.
This is the most important question, how the universe can be self-aware. Because the universe, of course, is looked upon by majority of scientists today within a philosophy called scientific materialism. Everything is matter and material interaction. No self-awareness is ever possible because if you look at things as objects, interacting objects is going to give you only more objects.
What we could call the absolute, the non-relative absolute, or what in the theological traditions is called God, right? God is everything that exists and everything that doesn't exist, the sum total of all things seen and unseen. No. So the point here is usually what we call God is the unmanifest, the infinite, unbecome, timeless, formless ground of all being.
И я должен изобрести свой язык, я должен изобрести систему своих ценностей. Я сам должен создать свой мир. Если я не создам свой мир, я буду рабом в мире другого человека.
Science, materialistic science, would see us as material objects. But in these holotropic states, we also discover that we can transcend space and time. And we are basically a field of consciousness that has no limits, no boundaries.
If they have all sorts of Big Bang experiences and flashes and whether it comes to breathing, deep breathing, or holotropic breathing, or whether it comes to psychedelic experiences, that might be very helpful because it opens their eyes and they see what is available. But then to avail yourself of it and really live in that, out of that self, put your whole weight onto that.
Core shamanism does not require anyone to believe anything, but gives you certain techniques that are universal or very widespread in hundreds and hundreds of human societies, journey to other worlds. And this perhaps is one of the greatest gifts of shamanism to the modern world. Everybody can learn to use. And so that is a gift that is also a feature of core shamanism.
If we could choose to take a godlike position, if you were God, for example, and you said, now I'm going to choose to create the universe. I'm going to go from the unmanifest position to the manifest position. And you say, go! And then you created the universe. Would you be consciously making an effort, if you were God, to stay back and say, no, I know I'm always free from anything that ever happens in time? No, if you were God, you would have no doubt of who you always are, and you just go fearlessly without looking back.
Death is the entry point to a next life. The new science based on quantum physics, primacy of consciousness, is teaching us one very important thing. It's that memory of the patterns of habit, memory of what we learned, is fundamentally non-local. It's not limited to space and time. And because it's non-local, it can also be used by somebody in the future.
So watch your fear, watch what you're afraid of, watch yourself when I'm afraid, oh, I am afraid. And then you catch yourself and say, that's my ego. I have to come back to the self. To come back to the self, the second thing would be silent. Find spaces for silence. There's too much noise.
Enlightenment is just to be present. It's instant present. And to sing a raga, you have to be completely present. And there's nothing else. There's no fear, there's no hope, there's no family, there's no nothing but the love of the moment. And you are connected with your true condition.
That a better term for enlightenment is spiritual maturity. The spiritual maturity implies that there are multiple dimensions on which we can mature, that it's a spectrum or a developmental process rather than an either-or, and that there can be many kinds.
That ideal, the tantric ideal, to me is very exciting because it is a balanced relationship, and relationship itself is important. The intimate relationship is the ground for enlightenment, or the potential ground for enlightenment through intimacy.
enlightenment is our own nature, and we get this enlightenment, or we recognize this enlightenment with what we have. So there is no idea of getting something from outside or changing something from inside.
In the Upanishads, there is a question, who are you? Who are we? And that answer again in Sanskrit is Tattvam Asi, which means you are it, or sometimes the translation is more archaic, thou art that, with a capital T. Teilhard de Chardin said something similar. He said we are not human beings having spiritual experiences, we are spiritual beings having human experiences.
How to be free by waking up. Because that's what enlightenment does. It gives you radical freedom from being identified or caught in any individual thing. Why? Because you're all of them. So you're radically free. You are one with everything. Your being is full of the entire universe. You are saturated with everything. There's nothing outside of you.
Just need to be in the space, in the mind, in the sound, in the context, empowered context of the own.
So I think that our senses are unique gifts which should not be scattered, which should not be misused, and can become a potent means for spiritual development.
You asked me about enlightenment. This is as good as it gets. When the mind is at peace and you're sitting in a safe environment, and you've sung and you're with friends and you're home.
In order to survive, I had to learn how to make my home here. So I never put my roots down. So home for me, I don't know what that is. Some people say, oh, my home is where I was born and I love to go back and I'm homesick. I don't really have that.
There is an abiding presence that is always there. This fundamental I, which is not dependent on this thought of the I. In the Indian traditions, Atman, it suddenly can morph into an identity with everything, Brahman. Brahman is the omnipresent reality. It is all things. So Atman becomes Brahman.
Begin to get along with each other, be in dialogue with each other, the different spiritual traditions and different civilizations. And if we get along, we can make something beautiful together. We can find a sustainable way to relate to nature. We can explore the cosmos, and we can explore the inner cosmos. This is such a promising time for humanity.
You become yourself. You are face to face yourself. You are the beginning, you are the end. You are the human being, you are the self, you are the being, you are the God. This brings you to, in your experience, is enlightenment. Nothing more than that.
And then most important, the latest scientific finding. More compassionate mind automatically create inner peace, inner strength, self-confidence. So that immense benefit for our health. Like constant fear, constant anger, hatred, actually eating our immune system.
See if you can get to the state of a kind of empty mind, like they might say in Zen, and letting go and waiting till something pops up that creative that you wouldn't have thought of before. And it usually comes very spontaneously.
Yeah.
And that's for me the source of an incredible amount of creativity.
God is everywhere. She is everywhere.
So this by electromagnetic power everywhere. Now, the only difference is bio. What I mean by bio? Bio means a living thing know how to use electromagnetic power.
Always in the present moment. For instance, your thoughts. Think of what you're doing now. Do what it is time to do now. When the bell rings, don't say, oh, I'm going to finish this now. Drop everything. When the bell rings and you are writing, you are not even supposed to dot the I. But if the I is written but the dot is not yet on, drop your pen and go what it is time to do.
Помните крепко на всю жизнь, все люди созданы Богом, все они миленькие, родненькие, любимые, сладенькие.
Человечество сейчас, за последние 50 лет, получило мощное искушение, которого не было никогда во всю историю предыдущего человечества. Я это повторяю с упрямством идиота.
We're in a unique time in human history where for the first time we have access to all the major religious and spiritual traditions. Below the surface differences, it's clear that there are common qualities of heart and mind that all the great religions and spiritual traditions value and say are really important for us to cultivate.
То есть во всем осмыслении, прохождении всего этого многообразия опыта. И именно тогда человек становится человеком. И потом он может уже пойти к Богу, когда он осуществил то, зачем он был послан на эту землю.
I think that's why we're here doing what we're doing, you know. It's any way that we can sound the alarm and point in the direction of this sacred reality will help us to make this transition.
People who are awake now care about the world. They care about the world process. They care about a lot of the difficulties and challenges we're facing, and they want to find solutions.
Я настолько наивен, что думаю, что если каждый человек будет делать что-то хорошее, то мир изменится к лучшему. Вот я наивный романтик, который так к концу жизни все равно не изменил своего детского мнения.
Why? Because our real nature, which we are saying, real nature, perfect condition of individual is beyond limitations, beyond the time and the space. So then that could not correspond with our mind. In general, we in our concept, we have mind and the nature of mind. This is not only for mind, but for everything.
Как только мы перестанем различать добро и зло, и перестанем говорить, что мы такие умные, что мы знаем, что добро, что зло, пелена спадет с глаз, и мы поймем, что мы из рая никогда никуда не уходили.
We don't need to establish a specific path or a specific procedure that we enter into this nature. This nature just becomes our own awareness. How normally we are living. It just integrates in our ordinary life. So, if, for example, before enlightenment we were working in the office, after enlightenment we are still working in the office. The fact that maybe we work more happy, with less tensions, and more people satisfied and happy around, is the benefit related with having a stable happiness.
Genuine sense of concern of well-being of other is the ultimate source of happiness, and also happiness on the level of a family level, community level, on national level or international level, or even with the whole universal.
the tradition says you put on Christ, and Christ is the divinity within you. You discover the divinity within you. People come then to the monastery and they also experience moments of enlightenment and they can cultivate it, because the main way of cultivating it is to find silence in your day. Big bang thing of enlightenment is not the important thing. We all have it, but really counts is that you let this now form your day, let it inform your daily life.
First rule is always the surrendering to the process and the opening up to other possibilities. And through the surrendering, we also learn how to lose our fears. And we practice to be more comfortable with other dimensions and with the way everything looks and feels differently.
You reinforce greed and fear and anger and jealousy. So you have to have an ethical foundation. Second, you have to have a practice which transforms emotions. That is, it becomes very clear that emotions such as fear and anger and jealousy are not only painful and destructive to oneself, but also to others. So one has to reduce those to whatever extent one can, and cultivate positive, helpful emotions such as love and compassion and joy.
That consciousness is the ground of being, in which matter exists as possibilities for consciousness to choose from. We have to bring in that inner non-local connection that people have with people, that I have the capacity of truly experiencing what you are feeling, myself.
The cosmos itself is unfolding into enlightenment. Is it suddenly there's a moment, a great aha, and a disclosure, you'd say, that's enlightenment. But the great teachers will say, and beyond that enlightenment is another one.
И ты понимаешь опытно, сердцем, о чем это было сказано. Ты много прочитал кулинарных книг, но наконец-то ты попробовал блюдо, и ты понимаешь, вот это о чем. Если ты это попробовал, ты уже ни на что не променяешь. И ты будешь идти, искать и искать. И вот интересный момент, что у каждого духовного искателя наступает момент, когда в прежних формах, та же благодать, тот же вкус становится недосягаемым. И мы или начинаем усиленно стучать в закрытую дверь и воспроизводить те же самые формы, или мы начинаем идти за сердцем и искать.
Say that the most important thing is not having a particular experience of spiritual intensity. At the beginning, that's important, but what's ultimately more important is having absolute confidence. Spiritual experience comes and goes, but when the doubt's given up, as my own teacher taught me, then you're free.
From clarity, we understand the idea of liberation, not having any doubts, do not remain in the doubts.
Very, very simple. When you do certain things and invite the spirits and they know you're serious, that even in a cave, without drumming, without anything, with just the isolation and seriousness, you can get assistance that is really essentially the same kind of assistance that is painted on the walls of those caves.
Deep spirit that I'm barely aware of, that I think draws me here and draws us here, these deep roots that I almost can't identify what that is, but I think it's partly this Russian bear, and there's like a hardiness, a warmth and hardiness in the people that feels very familiar in some strange way, because I haven't lived here myself. And I think when I hear like the Russian music and dance and the richness of the culture, something feels so at home and just feels like it's in my blood or in our bones or something. But it's like something very far away, and connecting with it deeply is very powerful.
Ибо мы же знаем, что реальность фрактальна, голографична. Все есть во всем. Если не найдем, то создадим, в конце концов. Кто же тебе мешает создавать прошлое, если не можешь создать, ну, хоть какое-то нормальное будущее?
We don't like it when physics is physics and psychology is psychology and spirituality is there and politics here. We want them, you know, more together.
Когда я в 65-м году, простите меня, в 11 лет слушал Битлз, я был абсолютно уверен, что вот это люди, которые твердо знают все. Они знают истину. И мне ни разу не приходилось обманываться в этом своем заблуждении. Я до сих пор, слушая их музыку, понимаю, что то, что они пели тогда, и то, что они пели после, продолжает учить меня жить. И если я для кого-то могу казаться подмогой в этом пути, я с удовольствием ей окажусь, потому что, по крайней мере, в том, что я делаю, я никогда не пытался обмануть.
I mean, we never did anything other than play meditation music. Last night, although it might look like a concert, it was just a meditation to us. It's a journey from silence when we begin into silence at the end of the concert, and that's the gift that we can share with people to allow them to experience and feel their own inner peace.
Личность нужна, какая-то идентификация нужна. И в какой-то момент, допустим, гнева, когда человек видит, что что-то неправильно происходит, и он может благодаря гневу быстро вмешаться в эту ситуацию, исправить, когда там сильный сейчас убьет какого-то слабого, или неразумный ребенок сейчас там, не знаю, задушит котенка или утопит его где-нибудь в ведре. Вопрос гармоничного сочетания.
We are enlightened through the senses. If you're touching, but you're not experiencing the other as the other, you're experiencing non-duality through that touch. That has a great potentiality to liberate.
The more one sees into reality clearly, the more one sees into who we really are, the more one is inclined to be ethical. The more one experiences love and compassion, the more you want to live in a way which benefits others.
Okay, I could be sitting here thinking about what I'm going to say next, wondering what's really on your mind, thinking about something I'm going to do later, or I could be here in the present, hearing not only the words that you say, but seeing your gestures, hearing your tone of voice, having a much more direct communication with what's actually going on. That's being mindful.
I don't know a lot of people who live from their deepest convictions. That's a very developed person who lives spontaneously from their deepest convictions. They can tell you what their deepest convictions are. They can put them in a philosophical context. They can put them in a moral context. They can tell you why, and then they really make their important decisions based on that. That changes the world, man.
What people have to do to liberate themselves of that kind of prison, what people have to do is to develop periods of being in their way of life. And how to do that is precisely what meditation, what yoga, what Tai Chi, what take any spiritual tradition, practice teaches.
Концепцию или любое явление, включая даже просветление, да, я рассматриваю с точки зрения этих трех уровней. Да, это точно так, как время. Но невозможно время объяснить с точки зрения, допустим, только роли. На уровне роли время есть, на уровне актера время – это творческая потенция, ты можешь делать с ним все, что хочешь, а на уровне зрителя времени нет. То же самое касается просветления. Да, на уровне роли это просто морковка перед носом, а на уровне зрителя просветления нет. Он само просветление, он то, откуда все и во что все.
Everyone really is a future Buddha to the in the Buddhist sense of enlightenment. You know, we all have Buddha nature, and therefore it's just a matter of our realizing it. and of removing our obscurations to realizing our already enlightened state.
Sharing some of the Buddhist practice, how to develop compassion, how to develop tolerance, and how to reduce egoistic sort of attitude, or self-centered, extreme self-centered sort of egoism. To non-believer, I share, again, the practice of compassion, not based on religious sort of concept, but based on our common sense and common experience.
Buddha Shakyamuni, since the beginning, explained everything is unreal, everything is relative. So then, if it is unreal, relative, just like a dream, also Buddha said life is just like a big dream. No? If we are knowing that kind, then our attachment diminishes. No? We are not giving too much importance.
Представьте себе отрезок. С одной стороны этого отрезка находится человек, просветленный, который в большинстве случаев пребывает в состоянии дзен, которому, чтобы изменился мир, ему нужно просто повернул голову, и мир изменился. К нему приходит ученик и говорит, что лучше, квадратное или круглое? А тот говорит, а ты как думаешь? Он говорит, я думаю, что круглое. Молодец, говорит он, и уходит ученик. Он в полном состоянии баланса. Его не качает ни вправо, ни влево. Для решения своих проблем ему не нужно делать ничего, они уже решены. С другой стороны, есть продюсер в Лос-Анджелесе. Он связан с социумом неотрывно. Его нельзя вынуть оттуда, потому что если его оттуда вынуть, тут порушится жизнь. И он разрушится, он развалится, ему не за что зацепиться, потому что он все свои пальцы уже врастил в эту стену. И нужно себя, мне кажется, качать из стороны в сторону. Сперва идти в одну сторону, не доходя, нельзя доходить, мне кажется, сваливаться в другую сторону. И чем сильнее тебя качает, тем сложнее удержать вот этот свой баланс.
In being, the possibilities can proliferate. If you throw a pebble in water, you find water waves and they spread and spread and spread. That magic of spread of possibility has to be brought into our living.
You know it's there. That increases your hope and your determination to contact it again and make it your permanent realization.
Сказано же в Писании, которое принято в этой стране, будьте как дети. Доверитесь Господу, и все будет нормально. Если Господь птиц одевает так, что все отдыхают рядом, неужели вы думаете, что Господь о вас не позаботится, если Он о птичках заботится? Согласен? Я просто считаю, что мы придумываем очень много вещей, которые нам самим в итоге очень мешают.
In Zen, are you enlightened was always taken as a trick. Because you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. If you say yes, then you clearly, no individual is enlightened. But if you say no, then you're just an ignoramus. You're an idiot.
Перемены, они сами начинают происходить вокруг тебя. То есть, и поэтому я лукавлю, когда говорю, что ничего не надо менять. Здесь какой-то очень тонкий психологический момент. Ты имеешь право это сказать только тогда, когда ты каждый день что-то меняешь.
A really enlightened person would say, well, now I'm getting to be an ordinary person. The openness and love for all your states of consciousness, consensus reality, dreaming, projections, and also this essence level. So we go back and forth between them. This is our great chance, I think, as a human race, to help the universe also become more conscious.
Он не борется за защиту своей веры или против оскорбления своих чувств. Потому что если я еще оскорбляюсь в моих религиозных чувствах где-то извне, я еще нахожусь в состоянии ветхого человека. Потому что Бога оскорбить невозможно. Измерение неба, которое внутри меня или тебя, оскорбить невозможно. Оно целостно воспринимает и принимает все.
I think what's already happening is that we are changing. We're expanding. I think the whole, on a global level, consciousness is definitely on the rise. even if it doesn't appear like this, but that's the media doesn't allow us to see, because the media, of course, never shows what we are doing here.
И здесь совсем ни при чем духовные практики, совсем здесь ни при чем какие-то самопогружения, самопознания, совсем здесь ни при чем медитации и какие-то трансперсональные изучения и прочее. Здесь важен внутренний баланс. А внутреннего баланса можно достичь не в Тибете, а живя в мегаполисе и да где угодно.
We are the whole universe. Sometimes we're a mess, and sometimes, and then not. And that transition is very important. Otherwise, you start turning against people. You want only peace, you want only quiet. And then it makes terrorists, it dreams them up to even become, it makes people, it doesn't help. Only peace doesn't help.
Бог нас создал, чтобы мы прославляли Бога добрыми делами. Вот цель нашей жизни. Милые, родные, любимые. Мы с вами счастливые люди. У нас Бог – любовь. Будем с Богом, с любовью. Да хранит вас Господь Бог, милостью и человек всегда на непреткновенно. Великое, святое, Божие на вас благословение.
Но когда видишь человека, человеку передается не только слова, передается его собственная жизнь, музыка его жизни. Эта музыка может очень многому научить. Поэтому я честно говорю, меня всему в жизни научила музыка. Наверное, только это и важно. Безупречно завязывать шнурки. Безупречно слушать музыку. Даже если половина этой музыки – это помехи.
And I'm realizing I could be singing Hey Jude, but what I'm singing is something for protection, for moving through the world, being protected, and sharing just sharing the goodness of life.
Люди уже, они не могут жить на том уровне ответственности, на котором они жили раньше. Понимаешь? Человечество не может. Оно не выживет, если оно не будет ощущать огромную ответственность за все человечество.
Before, there was one big event in 2000 years. Today, we have thousands among millions. Identifying what is meaningful is a capacity that we need to raise. We need to grow. This is very much about teaching, understanding what is meaningful.
Настоящее сыграть нельзя. Настоящее играет тебя. И, собственно, задача, в которой ты все время ищешь это настоящее, что неважно, под камерой я сейчас нахожусь или не под камерой, это же моя жизнь.
Think for yourself, as yourself. Now, where am I a little bit like the other person? Even a little bit.
Let's decide that life is all positive, and it kind of will be. And therefore, the shadow or the dark side is simply that which is ignored.
And the evolution means we try to do ourselves for getting better, recognizing, and we do our best with being present and not to distort it, and we try to collaborate with the people, knowing how is the circumstance, good or bad, and we work with the concrete with that. This is most important in daily life.
To live out of the self, not only glimpse it once in a while that we all belong together, but to live out of it and to live in such a way that the dignity of every other human being is respected.
Our opportunity now, before we annihilate ourselves, is to wake up to this dawning planetary civilization. We have this unique opportunity, humanity, at this point. It's a really a fantastic opportunity to mature as a species.
The main teaching, there is really one universal teaching that is important for the Western mind especially. Slow down without giving up the inquiring mind. It's the active, dynamic slowness that we need. In other words, do and be, do be, do be, do.
All major tradition carry same message, same practice of love, compassion, forgiveness, tolerance. So in that field, my own little experience, more calm mind. Of course, some disturbances come, but come and go, not reach deep level of emotion.
The definition of suffering is life lived apart from spirit. And the definition of happiness or fulfillment is life lived as spirit. It's the same life, it's the same universe. It's, are you one with it or are you separate from it?
The spiritual quest is the most important thing you can do in the world. But then again, don't take it too seriously. That would be a problem, you know.
Любовь настигает.
Потому что ведь еще что происходит, Володечка? Ну, здесь ничего не поделаешь, мы же... Так это же красиво, что там люди какие-то возникают, жизнь идет, монголо-татары проносятся туда, века пошли туда, под камерами. Все равно все снимается все время.
Enlightened enough.
So I often argue that sorry, that is the mindfulness reminder in my laptop computer. So
Because it works.
Yes, practically it works. Yes.
Проблема в том, что я не вижу никакой загадки. Никакой загадки, поэтому разгадывать нужно.
Это космическая свобода, это хаотическая свобода, это абсолютно безумная свобода.
Милость вечера от всегда на непредков, великое, святое, Божие на вас благословение. Храни вас, Матерь Божия, и все святые. Ну вот, видите, как хорошо. Еще что, вопросы ваши?